Sergeant and Mrs. Smith, you're going to love this house.
Is that a tub in the kitchen?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
Hi everybody and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today I'm going to be addressing a reader question of whether married people should merge finances and how to make decisions about money. And this was a Facebook group member question, so you should join my Facebook group because then you will have input into what I address. Obviously it won't be every suggestion, but many suggestions, many topics come from suggestions from Facebook group members. So before that, please do subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode was on touchless marriages where nobody touches, and the next one that I record will be also subscriber, whatever that is. So you'll get access to all of those for only $6 a month, $5.99 a month. That's a pretty good deal. All right, so my position on this is fairly straightforward. It is you are married and therefore money should be in a joint account, and that's that. Of course, many people, especially younger people, tend to want to keep their own money separate. Now, this works until one person stays home with kids. In that case, you know, because the people that say, okay, well, I make 60% and she makes 40% or vice versa, and, you know, so that's how we split all the bills. That seems fairly onerous and businesslike, which I will expand on. But also, like, then what if one of you stays home? Then do you get zero? You know, like, how do you get the, then you would get 0% of the bills, but like, how would that be, quote, fair within this previous rubric? You know, would the entirety of the thing still, you know, like, would it just be thrown out? Like, would it philosophically change, you know, and then it would be joint money? Like, to me, it's easier to start from the beginning and say, we are married, so therefore all money is joint and decisions are made jointly. And money is one of those things like sex where it's really never about the thing, it's about what it represents. And as I have a podcast episode literally called Sex is Not About Sex, well, money's not about money. And really, it's about intimacy, closeness, autonomy, and those, so, you know, when somebody wants to make their own decisions on how they spend money, frequently they like to make their own decisions in general, and they have issues with control and with being, you know, really very, very independent, possibly to the detriment of the marriage. So more, you know, they do what they want to do, my way or the highway, and they don't want to, you know, they don't want to compromise. They don't want to hear the other person's perspective. So that goes along with money decisions, and it goes along with everything. And just like when somebody withholds sex, it isn't just, and, you know, I don't mean withhold, because as I've discussed ad nauseum, you know, women don't experience desire, spontaneous desire within monogamy, so they're not really withholding per se. But when they don't try to get into the headspace for responsive desire to happen, those are people who also like to have their own money. There's people who just like to have their boundaries up, and they're more avoidant people, and they like to be alone more than they like to be together, you know. And so generally it seems that the more avoidant partners want to have separate money, and the more preoccupied partners want to have all the money together. But also the thing is, the preoccupied, okay, so it's like this. Securely attached people, it's kind of like the money isn't really a big deal. If culturally or in their friend group or what have you, people keep their money separate, then they do that. If people merge, then they do that. But it doesn't become this kind of hotbed of relational dysfunction the way that it does with insecurely attached people. With insecurely attached people, the more avoidant partners want to have separate money and separate, fully separate decisions about money from their own money. And within preoccupied people, they want to control the way that money is spent. So they want to control how the other person spends money too. So it's very similar to how all of the attachment issues go, right? So preoccupied people are more intrusive. They have fewer boundaries than they need to have. They have more control, more jealousy, more wanting to surveil, you know, surveillance on the partner. And avoidant people want to have their separate lives too much, to the point that it's like, why are you even in a relationship? So my perspective is that you hammer out the issues with money early on, and you have joint money. Because if you divorce, that money's going to be joint anyway, unless you had a prenup, which most people don't have in their first marriage. And any money that you earn within the marriage is usually considered to be joint money anyway. So the point is, why not be vulnerable and have a joint account and act like you're married? And by this, I mean make joint decisions about how money should be spent, especially if intimacy and closeness has been a major issue in your relationship. Now, if there is a history of one person trying to control the other person's money, well, then certainly this can't work out, and you need to be talking to a therapist and probably a financial advisor about, what to do to have your own money, because this person keeps on, kind of trying to control you. There's something called financial abuse, where somebody tries to control with money. I'm not really talking about that situation here. I'm talking about more like my home projects podcast, home renovations. Like one person wants to renovate the kitchen and the other person thinks that's a waste of money. Well, like, how would you figure that out? Well, the same way as you do with any other decision, and I talk a lot about how giving and being generous and not having excessive boundaries and preferences is really good for your marriage. And it's in opposition to a lot of today's rhetoric about, being completely independent and making, having your own preferences be like the number one thing and you can never go past a boundary. Well, that doesn't really work when people have like a million boundaries on things. So, if you are somebody who wants to go on a vacation and your spouse will never let you go on a vacation, that's not a money issue. That's your spouse being a rigid person issue. And if you're a person that wants to go on endless vacations, then that's not a money issue per se, although that may be how it manifests, but it may be a responsibility issue, or a lack of financial acumen is symptomatic of a larger putting your head in the sand about the realities of the world. So generally, there are no issues that are just about sex or just about money. If somebody is sexually generous, they tend to be financially generous. If somebody's sexually withholding, they tend to be financially withholding. And this is why I tell women all the time, don't marry somebody who's cheap, And so that doesn't mean that you need to have a man who's buying you things all the time. It's like when you want to go to a restaurant, does he say, no, we can't go, it's too expensive? Because what that's going to turn into is that you're going to be asking for piano lessons for your child, and he's going to say, no, they're too expensive, let him learn from YouTube, and you're not going to like that. So, and I see that happen a lot, and the reason I tell women to do this more than men is because women are still not the primary breadwinner and frequently stay home with kids more, so pragmatically, you can be more financially dependent. In an ideal situation, nobody feels financially dependent, if not a stay-at-home parent or the lower earner or anything, because it's known to be group, joint money because you're married. But, in situations where there is any sort of marital dysfunction, then this frequently plays out in withholding and arguments about money, etc. So what should you do if you continue to have these arguments? What am I going to say? You should go to couples counseling, but not only focused on money. Open your mind to the idea that money is where larger issues about intimacy and interdependence play out. There's no world in which it's just about money, like there's no world where it's just about sex. It's representative of a larger ability to be close and to rely on one another. There's trust issues. Now, if you grew up seeing your family fight about money and your mother saying your father was controlling or cheap, or your father saying that your mother was overspending, then you're obviously going to come out of that with a lot of issues that you're probably, if you think about it, replicating right now. Being like the man who's always upset that the woman overspends, or being the woman who feels constrained by the man's cheapness. Or you could be in the inverse situation, but likely it's a variant. Likely the attitude that you saw about money growing up is what is permeating your current interactions about money now. Whether or not you are with the same gender parent or you're like the opposite gender parent really doesn't matter, and for a lot of people that grew up hearing about money all the time, money is like a big thing that they think about. And if you didn't grow up hearing about money all the time, then this seems crazy that people would have these big fights about money or think about money all the time. But it's a big thing. If you grew up in a household where people were constantly talking about bills and money and how much this cost and that cost and whether we're keeping up with the Joneses or not, or, then it becomes like a major way that you think about the world. And I've recommended that you guys listen to Fleishman is in Trouble, not listen to, rather watch. It was a Hulu series. And a major issue in the marriage of the main character of Fleishman and his wife was money. And she wanted more money than he did. And that was because she grew up with less money than he did, and among other things. So you and your partner could use this podcast as a launching off pad, for a discussion about what money means to each of you, what sharing and commingling finances would mean to both of you. How are decisions made about money, and is it reflective of a power differential in the relationship in general? Because usually the person who holds all the cards and who has more power in the relationship also makes the financial decisions. And that may be fine for somebody who's younger and less confident, but as that other person gets older, they may resent that this other person makes all the financial decisions, even if at first that was something that they looked for because they had their own self-esteem issues about ability to navigate money. So that happens a lot. And I have like a post called 8 Reasons Women Are Scared of Making Money. And women are frequently raised to think that men should manage the money. I know I was raised to think that myself. And it took until later life. And then I was like, oh, I can do this. And I feel a lot better when I do know what the hell's going on in our bank accounts. And a lot of women just completely cede that control to their husbands. And then later in life, they're like, wait, what? A, I don't know how much money we even have. And B, why did I think that I couldn't do this? Why did I think that I was not somehow smart enough to understand our financial situation? And maybe I wanted input in the decisions and wanted to make other decisions, And so this can be a major point of friction for couples as they mature if the woman wants to start taking over or being involved in decisions that previously had been considered by both to be the sole purview of the man. And also when a woman starts making more money later in her career, she may then say, well, now I do want to know what's going on with the money because before I didn't know because I wasn't making any money, I didn't care. But now I really, want to know what we're investing in or what our long-term plans are, et cetera, et cetera. So in general, this could be a moment where you sit down and you think, are we really communicating well about money? Are we both happy with how we are handling money? And if not, what greater issues does this speak to in our relationship and our ability to rely on one another, trust one another, respect one another's thoughts and decisions? Is one of us kind of always condescending to the other's priorities and saying that isn't worth spending money on? Because that's a common thing, and that is never just about money. Again, that's a more global issue about respect. So these are things that are discussed in couples counseling, but never just by themselves. They're discussed as representative of larger thematic concerns in the relationship, and that is what I'm encouraging you to do, even if you DIY this conversation without a counselor and you try to talk about it. Like, why do we always fight so much about money? What was money like in your family? What were the discussions about money like? Who managed the money in your family? What were the discussions like about money in my family and who managed the money there? How is this the same or different? How does it influence? How did we change over time? When we were young versus now, how has it changed over the course of our careers? What are our values? How much money do we really want to save or versus spend? What do we want to show our children in terms of how money is handled and how decisions about money and global decisions, not just about money, are handled within a marriage? These are all really interesting questions that could bring a couple much closer together if they are open-minded and flexible enough to really get into, a deep discussion about it, which many people don't. No matter how much money they have or don't have, they think of money as a taboo subject, just like sex is frequently thought of that way. And much like sex, your marriage is going to improve dramatically if you can talk about money. Because you got to talk about everything in your marriage, everything that's important. And money and sex are both very important. All right, I hope that you found this interesting and it gave you at least a couple things to think about. And please do subscribe because the next episode will be subscriber. And I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day.